Hey guys, it's Tammy Dunnett, your host of the Leadership Communication Expo, bringing you access to industry leaders who are sharing their simple, actionable, and step-by-step strategies so that you can fully embrace the leader you are meant to be, master conflict resolution, and design and create engaging and inclusive teams. With me here today, I have Nancy Levin, bestselling author, master coach, trainer, and founder of the Levin Life Coach Academy. Nancy Levin is a master coach, podcast host, and bestselling author of several books. Formerly the event director at Hay House for over a decade, Nancy is now the founder of Levin Life Coach Academy, offering in-depth coaching, training, and certification programs designed to support students to make themselves a priority by setting boundaries that stick. Super excited to have this conversation today because we are actually talking about setting boundaries that stick, how to identify your no to free your yes. Welcome, Nancy.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to have this conversation. I think boundaries is such an important topic. I mean, not just for our leaders, but for everybody in everyday life. And there's so many ways in which it creeps in and kind of has us doing things that we're not comfortable with. So why don't we just talk about what boundaries are and what that looks like?
Sure. So I define boundaries as the limits that I set around what I will not do, will or will not tolerate, and will or will not accept. So my boundaries are very particular to me, and they're very personal. And really what it comes down to is what's okay and not okay with me. And from that place, what's really essential to remember is that it's up to me to identify my own boundaries. So, there's this myth out there that other people cross our boundaries.
Yes.
And
I say
and
that
right. And I want to go on record with saying, if my boundaries are being crossed, I'm the one crossing the boundary. So in other words, it's up to me to set my boundary, and it's up to me to hold my boundary. So it's not up to anyone else to respect, maintain, hold, honor my boundary. It's up to me. And what this automatically will do is move me from blame and victim into responsibility and empowerment.
Now, with that, is there some fear, though, that goes along with, because you have to express them, you need to share them, you need to be able to articulate them. What is that hesitation or limitation that has got people stuck in the no that they kind of need freedom from?
So first, what I'll say about boundaries is not every boundary needs to be verbalized. So because my boundaries are really between me and me, even if they involve another person, not every boundary needs to be verbalized, since I'm the one who sets it and I'm the one who holds it. So that also gives me the opportunity to build in the pause to identify, is this a yes or is this a no? So what often happens when a direct request is made of us, especially if we have tendencies toward people pleasing or peacekeeping or conflict avoiding, or we don't want to rock the boat, when a direct request comes in, then we go into a knee-jerk yes. And we say yes so fast. And we say it from a place of obligation or responsibility, or we don't want someone to be angry or upset or disappointed, or we want to be the hero. So we have all these reasons why we give a knee-jerk yes. And the truth is, the only reason and qualifier to say yes to anything is desire. So what I often tell my clients is, if a direct request comes in and you're ready to say no out of the gate, say no. If you're not ready to say no, simply say, I will get back to you tomorrow. So part of that is to build in the pause so I can really consider, is this something I want to do? Because we all know what it's like to say yes, put something on our calendar, and then look at it on our calendar and be like, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? Or why did I say yes? Or, some version of that. So we want to nip that in the bud. So we want to actually start considering, is this a yes or is this a no? Is this a desire? Is this not? And remembering that every time I say yes to someone else, when I want to say no, I'm saying no to me.
Mhm.
So we really need to get clear on that yes and that no, so that we're not continually giving ourselves this short end of the stick.
It sounds like we traditionally have kind of set ourselves up for an either or situation, but that there's this middle ground that we can play in for a while to really get a sense as to, will this serve me? How will this serve me? Will it serve others? Like, what is it really that's in this for me? And
Right. And part of that is we are also, we've been trained to think that someone else's urgency is ours.
Mhm.
And so this also allows us to really build in that pause so that I'm not just answering because I think I need to in the moment, but that I'm actually giving myself permission to really consider what's okay and not okay for me.
I think in the workplace, saying yes, that obligation piece that you brought forward, it reminded me, I initially flashed right back. I was having a conversation with a supervisor. She asked me to do some things, and I said, yeah, this is great. And can we try it this way? And one of her statements to me was, do you think I get to say no to my boss? And I was like, yes, you do get to say no to your boss. But she didn't know that or believe that to be even a possibility. It was an either or. So I'm thinking of
Right.
our leaders, and they're also maybe thinking this too. How do I get to say no to my boss? How do I influence boundaries around capabilities, desires, needs? What would you share with them? How does this
Yeah.
pause work for them?
Yeah. So, I also really see that in many circumstances where in the workplace people are afraid to say no
Mhm.
to their boss, part of it is they go to the extreme of, if I say no, I'll get fired. They
Yeah.
go all the way to the extreme, which sure could be the case, but it is not likely the case. The other thing I see is that they're saying yes to things that are outside of their scope of work,
Mhm.
that are outside of their own responsibility, that are outside of their compensation. And I encourage people I coach to actually have the conversation of, if I say yes to this, what does it look like in terms of compensation of either money or time, quite frankly?
Mhm.
And how can we make this work for both of us? Or to go in and say, that if a boss says, I need you to stay late tonight, to be able to say, I'm actually not available to stay late tonight, but I could come in early tomorrow, if that's reasonable. But what I notice is, especially in the workplace, people are in such fear of of something that is likely not going to happen.
Mhm.
And there is a conversation that can be had, even if you're in a position that is, lower in the hierarchy, let's say. You still are a human being. You still can consider your life and your needs before saying yes.
Mhm.
And you can ask for what you need if you say yes.
I agree. I think that is something that's missing in terms of a possibility in the workplace. And those conversations are difficult to come up and just start that conversation. Do you have a recommendation as to what could they say to their boss when they feel like this is maybe encroaching on their own free time? Now, you'd mentioned, and I think this is important, the compensation of time and or
Hmm.
money. There's some organizations where you're a salary employee, so we own you 24/7. There's kind of this underlying current that whatever needs to be done has to get done in order for us to move forward. What would you recommend?
So, first, I want to sort of look at this from a slightly different angle. I believe that the people who are most impacted by this reactionary approach to their supervisor or their boss. These people are currently likely using their job to determine their value and their worth.
Mm.
So when we are determining our value and our worth by what we do, achieve, produce, being the yes person, being the, I can get the impossible done person. I'm the one and the only one person. When we're basing our value and our worth on that, we really need to evaluate what's happening, what's having us say yes in those circumstances, instead of being able to say, as I was saying earlier, it can be as simple as, I'm not available tonight to help you, but I could help you tomorrow. It might be, I recognize that what you're asking me to do is actually outside of my job description, and it's really outside of what I'm being compensated for. So if I say yes, are you willing to address that with me? Are you willing to look at that? It's also legitimate to remember that, yes, even if I'm a salaried employee, it doesn't mean 24/7. We think it means that. We think we have to respond in, a nanosecond, or we think we have to, be on, on call 24/7. That is not the case. And it's up to us to actually enforce the changing of the reinforcement of that, that. So part of the boundary conversation is also, really getting clear on, okay, if I'm on salary, it is predicated on some version of 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, or whatever it is, that I can actually set boundaries with even with my boss or my team or whoever, saying, I'm letting you know I'm not available before 9 a.m. and I'm not available after 6 p.m. Anything that comes in before or after, I will address in the time that I'm there. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And I think people need to hear that. Having been in various positions in different organizations, from private to public to government to federal, I think there is a culture, an unwritten current, that this is expected of you when you're in a leadership position, that you are always available. And especially in today's workplace, hybrid, distance, we're connected by IT,
right?
That those boundaries can be harder to set.
They can. However, I also think as a leader, it is essential that we set these boundaries and become role models for our employees. It is essential. So even with, the remote working, and I have a team literally who's all over the country, and I have team members who are out of the country, who are in very different time zones. And in my business, it's very known that I may send a Slack message, I may send an email, I may reach out at a particular time because that's when I'm working. And they all know that they are not to deal with anything until they have, quote unquote, clocked in. And, I was one of those overachieving, overgiving, overdoing employees when I was in my position at Hay House. I was famous for replying to an email basically before it had even come in. I everything I did was just at at warp speed. And we pay a price for that. It takes a toll, and it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable even for the most I have tremendous endurance, tremendous stamina, tremendous capacity. It is not sustainable, and nor should it be.
The leadership piece of it, I want to come back and address that leadership piece, because really that's what the people are here to listen to
Hmm.
and gain those. I love that you said, we have an understanding in my organization that I'm going to send things when I'm working, but you do not have an obligation. And I think people need permission to have those conversations
Hmm.
with their
Hmm.
employees, because sometimes
Hmm.
my most creative time will be 4 a.m. or
Right.
8 at night, but I don't want to have to censor my work to set boundaries for them, but that they can set their own boundaries within this confine.
That's right. And so I do encourage, you know, people in leadership roles to have these conversations with their teams and to give permission and to actually come together to create the way that work is going to flow. I know other organizations who are quite corporate, and they even have flexibility. They have 2 start times and 2 end times because they recognize that some of their employees are not morning people. And some of their employees are not night people. So some of their employees take the early 8-hour shift, and this is a regular kind of corporate office. This isn't, a restaurant or anything. But some of them take an early shift and some of them take the later shift because it adheres to when they're actually going to show up at their best.
I love it. So what would be the first step to setting boundaries that stick? Let's talk about some process.
Hmm. Yeah, the first step is to really first get clear on, as I was saying, what's okay and not okay for me. So we have to be able to connect with, what do I think? What do I want? What do I need? What do I feel? And start here. So to be able to even set a boundary, we have to know what's okay for us and what isn't okay. And sometimes we learn the hard way. We learn what isn't okay by sort of dabbing our toes into it. But it really is an invitation to, first and foremost, give ourselves permission to consider our own needs at least as much as we're considering the needs of others.
Mm.
This is at home, this is at work, this is anywhere. Then to be able to consider our own needs first. So we want to be able to consider our own needs at least as much, eventually more than, and then first. And it doesn't mean that we're not considering the needs of others. It simply means that I'm going to stop and think and contemplate and feel in my body, is this a yes for me? Or is this a no?
Mm-hmm.
It has to start there.
That's beautiful. And I love, it really connects back to the whole conversation at the beginning, is that it doesn't have to be either or, but find
Mm-mm.
that space for you to contemplate it. And it doesn't have to be like a day's worth of contemplation. It can be, can I just have
No.
seconds to think about how I'm going to
Yep.
be able to implement this?
Yep.
The other thing I'm wondering is, with these boundaries, when they're saying yes to something, you mentioned that they're saying no to something else, or to themselves. Could they also use a strategy like, if I say yes to this, how would you like me to manage these other pieces? Like, make it more of a collaboration in terms of setting
Mhm.
those boundaries as to what the expectations are. Because even as a leader, we feel like we take the weight on and we need to implement to, make the others
Mhm.
happy. But what is that conversation looking like when we want to negotiate what the priorities are? I guess maybe that's the
And
question.
and that actually was what I was going to come back to even be able to say, so what I'm noticing is that if I say yes to this, it means that this will go on the back burner.
And are you okay with
So, right. And so I want to make sure that I'm working on what has the highest priority.
that? Mm-hmm.
Can we together determine that?
Mm-hmm. And then a leader could role model that with their employees.
Hmm.
So if I'm coming to you with
Yeah.
this project, can you fit this in? I think would be a great next step. Now that I've said yes to this and we are now collectively engaged in this, what is it that
Mhm.
we need you to say yes to, so
Yep.
that we can move this forward? And what are we saying no to down the other end?
I also think it's very valuable to have someone on your team who will say no to you,
Hmm.
and who will say to you, when we first started focusing on this project, we were clear on our priorities. And now, weeks into it, I'm noticing that there is like we're getting diluted here.
Mm,
So I want to see what needs to be done to bring us back to our focus.
mhm.
I think it's very valuable.
I agree. And I think having those check-in
Mhm.
points too.
Mhm.
After you've said yes, it's not just a yes and then it's done. It's a yes and then what's the next step and what's the next follow-up and how do we stay on track?
Right.
It sounds like there's a lot to this.
Yeah, and I think especially also as leaders, I know that for my team, I will go in and I, within a context and within a time frame, I will also ask them, what's reasonable for you as a deadline?
Yeah.
If we know that this whole big thing needs to be done by this date, what's reasonable for you as a deadline for this piece? So instead, so I'm very willing to work that way because I also know that I've hired people who I trust, and I hire people who I know will tell me the truth. A, I've created a community in my organization that is really based on truth telling. And I think that's an important piece too.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think connected with boundaries is relationships.
Yes,
They kind of go together. And how do you build that
absolutely.
so that you can have these cultures where people can say, hey, you know what? This isn't working right now. And I've gotten backlogged with something else and we need to revisit timelines. I think this is amazing.
Yeah, because what happens is if 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 we're relating with each other in such a way that we're always saying yes, for example, and yet the saying yes is killing me.
Mhm.
It's draining me, I'm exhausted, I'm stressed, whatever. It's not actually the healthiest culture to be engaged in. And the other thing is that if I say no, you're going to trust my yes so much more.
Oh, I love that. The other thing I was thinking, and we'll just touch on this and then we'll get to the transformation equation guide that we want to talk about,
Mm, okay.
is as a leader, I love
Mhm.
a yes person. I know I can
Mhm.
just put it on their desk, they're going to say yes, and I can walk away
Mhm.
from it. I also can have a lot of tension with the no person. And I feel like this conversation will help leaders look at yes and no's in a new way and maybe broaden that conversation. Instead of just saying, I can rely on Nancy, she's going to do this, I'll drop it on her desk, maybe stop and pause and say, Nancy, how is this going to impact the rest of your work?
Right.
Make sure it's a
And
true
the
yes.
right. And the other thing I've learned, because I had a person on my team who was, I would say, a no person. And I really had to learn that her saying no was actually the way she slowed down.
Oh, that's good.
That so I look at, in all relationships and in work, we are either microwaves or crock pots. And I actually think Brene Brown said that first, and I love it. But she was a crock pot. She couldn't just say yes on the spot.
Mhm.
And so she would say no. And then that would slow the whole team down to actually look at other options or
Mhm.
look at other ways. So it part of it too is really understanding what kind of people we're working with.
I love it. I love the
Hmm.
microwave and the crock pot. I had not heard that before, but it's such
I
a great
love it too.
visual.
I love it too. I love it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I do hope this gives our leaders pause to think about who's in their organization and how they engage with issues and to just take a moment and recognize that this might be connected to something deeper. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
So you wanted to share the transformation equation guide with our listeners.
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about what that is.
Sure. So I have what I call my transformation equation, which is change equals vision plus choice plus action.
Mm,
So if we want to make a change in any area, we do need to have clarity of vision of where we want to go. And we need to then be willing to use that vision as a gauge by which we make our choices and take our actions. And part of this is recognizing that if we believe and agree that where we are right now is the culmination of every choice we've made, every action we've taken up till now, then it goes to prove that if we don't do something different, our future is going to arrive looking very much like our past or our present. So I really look at our present moment choices as the predictor of our future. Our present moment choices are actually the crystal ball we're all looking for. So if we, and I'm talking about, everything from micro choices and micro actions to grander ones, but recognizing that we want to stay conscious, we want to stay aware of the choices we're making and the actions we're taking, and that remembering that they will only do one of two things. They will sabotage our vision or serve it.
Oh my gosh, so true. And the way we speak around those things, the words that we
Mm-hmm.
use can be like the window into that crystal ball. If you can't see
That's
it,
right.
and really start to reflect on how you're talking about things, right? That's so
That's
powerful.
right.
So powerful. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today and giving us a new way to look at boundaries in the workplace as a role as a leader, how we interact with our superiors and those who we are guiding through this journey. It's been very insightful. I got a lot of notes written down here. I love it. Any last parting words for those who are listening today?
I think it comes back to really being able to consider yourself in your own life instead of just everyone else around you.
Mm.
So it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be the both and of I'm willing to take care of my needs as I also care for others around me.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.